Hello there everybody and welcome to my trade and economy guide for Songs of Syx. So in this video I'm going to talk about all the things that you need to know to keep your denaries rolling and understand why they do and understand when they won't anymore before they don't anymore. So let's get started with the fundamental basics. First of all, you need to be of the rank of an Amarier to have access to the export and import stations, and you will need somebody in your neighborhood to trade with. You can do that by doing diplomacy and going for this agreement. It'll cost some money. You don't have money at that point, so you need to offer as many resources to fulfill that agreement. Sometimes your neighbors will just do that on their own, but most of the time you want that way before the AI decides to trade with you. So after these things are set up, you can go trading. So I want to firstly explain the most basic processes of trading, and then we're going to go over all the data. So trade can be done in the following ways. Once you have done this trade agreement, you can now demand resources from your neighbors. Whatever you demand, you see down here its value, and that's the kind of value that you need to fulfill either with whatever resources you have in your warehouse or the denarii that you have earned over the course of the time, and then you can either barter for a lower price or just accept. The prices here get directly influenced by the opinion of your neighbors. So if you are a warmongering piece of insert expletives here, then people don't like you so much. This game has a pretty diverse way of defining their opinion around you. Either way, the higher the opinion, the better prices. The lower the opinion, the worse the prices. So you can become colleagues or even form an alliance to improve these prices. That is how you can work things out to trade with. So once you have done this part, you can also go for automated trade in a bigger sense. There's export depots and import depots for exactly these reasons. Export depots get configured like, well, let me build a new one to show it better. So you build them. Can be built in many different sizes, by the way. The larger the export depot, the larger the amount of ware it can transport. So if you have really big amounts of export volumes, you will need to crank up the size of these eventually too. So here's the raw export depot. First of all, let the AI adjust the worker amount. Seriously, it is a good idea because this way it'll get lowered when there's nothing to be exported and increased when there is. So next up, we need to define what kind of good is going to be exported. You just click the icon. Mind you though, you can only export whatever is stored in your warehouses. If it's not stored in your warehouses, you cannot export it. So let's just select, for the sake of the demonstration here, leather. And as you see there now, you get a complete introduction about the price. Add the trade partner. So if you have several trade partners, you will see several prices. And you now can configure where these wares are to be taken from. If you keep this icon on, the export depot will just grab the material within its range. You see, there is this cyan radius, and you can increase or decrease that. If this is on, the workers will try to fetch the good meant to be exported just from pretty much about anywhere, and they'll grab everything. So don't you do this. You deactivate that, and you activate a pull source for them. In my opinion, that's the best controllable way. You have now to connect it to a warehouse where the specific good is being stored at. Since I don't really want to do the trade, I'll link a wrong one. If you have linked the correct one, now a yellow exclamation mark or a green exclamation mark will show up. A red exclamation mark shows you it doesn't work. You left click it, and now you define the pull limit. So this allows you to only pick up a good if in the warehouse there is like 70% full of that good. So this way you can clearly define how much you want to export of a certain ware. That's a very powerful and meaningful tool to configure your export amounts. So far, so good. Here you see the price development, and here you see how much the export depot currently is full width to export. You must realize that this is a real simulation. The stuff is stored there, and then your neighbors will order it eventually. If you have too much of it stored, the prices will drop eventually. So here's the next trick that I strongly recommend. Set up a reasonable price cap. So for example, if we enter 30, if ever we destroy the prices due to excessive exporting, we will stop eventually from hurting ourselves. If you don't do that, you are allowing your export depots to actively destroy the market by just overproviding like hell. So this is something that always should be done to maintain a proper economy. So that's that. Sometimes I don't know how this here we can also order a good from our neighbors. I don't really know why this is in this menu, but well, this is ordering from the best price or the closest neighbor. This is just some hot link to this diplomacy menu, is all. Alright, so now we know how to export items. The import side works similarly. Let me show you. So you build that up. And unlike the export depot, it doesn't need a worker. That is a nice thing. The people who sell the stuff come with their own caravan and dump it on top of the import depot. So you probably would want to place that down right next to a warehouse where the imported good is actually being stored at. So here again, you can build these in larger and smaller sizes, depending on the volume of trade. But let me say one thing, the tier 1 size already does a lot of heavy lifting for a starting city. Don't you go too big on these numbers. The size of these, the maximum size, is extreme, okay? Just so you know. Now, if you want to import something, let's say we want to import herbs. We select that now, and now we get to select how much of that good is supposed to be kept at stock. So the import depot will check the total of all your warehouses and will then try to fill them to 5% of the total stock, 25%, whatever you configure. That's that. So all in all, this way you can tell the game how full it should regularly restock your stockpiles of something. So for example, here at the opiates, I did that for my hospital. So I constantly have a stockpile of 50%. The thing is, keep in mind here, the game has spoilage. So the more you store, the more does spoil, the more you need to re-import. So keep these as slim as possible. As a matter of fact, this is over-importing. It should be lower. Just for the sake of explanation here. There's not much more to be said except for this here goes the same way. Install a reasonable price cap if you don't want to get robbed blind, so you can stop buying once the prices go too insane. Alright, now we know all this. I want to go next into the tools of the trade, the economy screen that you got here. So here we get everything listed that we need to know to manipulate and understand the markets in an appropriate way. So let me guide you. Here we see the development of our stockpiles. So this is pretty interesting, as you can see downward or upward trends this way. As you can see, this shows, for example, where productions go. This is a pretty nifty tool to realize if one of your productions doesn't kick it anymore, especially the food production. But here comes the interesting part. Here we see how much is produced and how much has been lost/consumed. So here you get an exact calculation about where the things went. So that is very important. Your earnings tab here shows how much of the stuff is being traded away, but we need to go for a specific good, as this is the global one. This is mixed and pretty hard to see a generalistic data. So let's go for something I regularly export, the clay. So here we can now clearly see we produced a certain amount a day, we consumed a certain amount a day, and we traded away a certain amount a day. We spoiled a certain amount a day as well. So here we also see now the same thing, just with denarii added on top of it. So we can now see where we earn how much and how much denarii and how it reflects on our global production rate. This here is the price development axis, and this is probably the most interesting thing of this whole data sheet in my personal opinion. The higher, the bluish thingies are your buy prices, and the orangish thingies are the sales prices. So I'm exporting clay here currently, and I can see there is no heavy drop in the prices due to my export activities. If you can see that there is a steep plummet, you obviously export too much and you're overstraining the markets. You should try to export less and probably lower your production rates and put your workers to work elsewhere. Or the other alternative, if it is something like clay, crank up your production of pottery and export that instead. But the game here is merciless. Markets are eventually oversatisfied. You cannot crank out more money out of your neighbors than they have. So that is one thing which limits your denarii gains out of trade eventually by the sheer factor of how many neighbors you have to trade with. The more markets you have, the more you can spread it out and the less dilution happens. But on the other hand, you can also use it to just destroy a market entirely. I mean, for roleplay's sake, that is fun, but currently I don't know how much of a real gameplay benefit that would have. Kudos to the comment section if you can bring it up in some way that that everybody could enjoy. So now you know how to interpret this. This is pretty important because sometimes price plummets also happen that you don't have anything to do with, because turns out your neighbors do trading as well. So this is pretty important if you all of a sudden notice that you're not earning money well enough anymore, or this livestock market here is also really interesting to see that the stuff is really on insane sales prices, but on insane buy prices, but the sales prices are really crappy. So this is your tool to find the proper market for you. This treasury screen is also very important because I want to talk inflation. So inflation does decrease your wealth by 10% a year, always, without any anything you could do against it besides technology. So this is also working for you if you have debt. So if you are in colossal debt, it'll eventually almost evaporate. This is a really interesting thing to know. We can here see how things develop in our wallet, and most importantly, we also can see how our market activities go. So it is a nice way of keeping an overview about what is happening, because this year I personally find this not so good for an overview about my trade activities, personally more for what's happening around me in the world. This here is where you can just see how the numbers develop, how inflation hits your stuff, and where your money is coming from besides trade. So money can also be earned by many different ways that are all pretty self-explanatory. I really considered explaining more about that in this tutorial, but honestly, tributary payments and diplomacy and all these things, I think they are pretty easy to understand. Tourism is just setting up the according building and letting people come. And if anything, I would make a complete dedicated tourism tutorial. So that all being said, you are now armed with all the things that you need to do proper trade. I just want to point towards one technology that I mentioned here. Accounting. This way you can lower the deflation. This is by all means a late game tech, but it is really painful later down the road when you have several million denarii and you have to accept that 10% of that is just going into thin air each year. So accounting is where you can work against that. I haven't found any other technologies. Please correct me, dear comment section, if I have missed a spot. That's that. Have fun with the economy, and drop me your comments down below. Leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and you'll find in the description box the link to several other of my tutorial playlists. So check them out if you want to have more info about Songs of Syx. I'd be delighted to have you guys there. Also, there's Discord, there's Twitch, where I do stream regularly, and if you'd be so kind to support this channel financially, I'd be forever grateful. A big thanks to all the supporters of Icon Gaming, and a big thanks of course to you watching this video up until the very end. I deeply appreciate you guys hanging out until this spot of the video. Have a good one. See you soon.